Okay, we're going to take a look at the classwork assignment from yesterday, 15.3. I'm going to take you through the questions first and then the term second. If you need to add to your response, feel free to do so. All right, so question one, explain how Cold War tensions were intensified by the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Well, the United States felt the Soviet Union posed a serious threat because it had also developed an atomic bomb and no longer had a monopoly on this. As the Soviet Union moved ahead in the arms and space race, there was a lot of concern in the United States as we began to invest in science and mathematics to kind of beef things up and potentially create a more devastating bomb, working to go from the atomic bomb to the hydrogen bomb. Both the United States and the Soviet Union began to create more and more powerful weapons, and as the threat to the United States and Soviet Union collectively from each other grew, so too did the danger to the entire planet. To explain how President Eisenhower's response to communism with the Eisenhower Doctrine was different from Truman's. Eisenhower focused on stockpiling up of nuclear weapons, building planes, missiles, and submarines needed to deliver them. He believed they should be ready to go to the very brink of war. This differed from Truman's policy, though both felt it was necessary to stop the spread of communism. So stopping the spread of communism is the common goal. But their methods of kind of achieving this are a little bit different. Okay, thirdly, explain how the United States and the Soviet Union competed for influence in other areas around the world, including in Hungary, as well as the Suez Canal crisis. People in Hungary and Poland, as well as other Soviet bloc countries or dominated countries, wanted more political and economic freedom. They wanted to break away from Soviet rule, and the United States tried to support them as best we could. This would lead to uprisings in those countries. Some progress is made, but very little, as the Soviet Union had the superior troops. They rolled their tanks in and they quickly put an end to the Hungarian protest. Their tanks crushed the Hungarian Revolution. This helped to create more of an international Cold War, meaning that beyond just the United States, because obviously, countries, or at least the people, for example, Hungary or Poland, are supportive of the United States, even though they really could do very little about their situation. And then the Suez Canal, we'll look at that crisis a little bit more, but there was more and more concern over control of the Suez Canal because that is one of the major means of transportation by ship in that region of the world. It links together basically the Mediterranean Sea vis-a-vis the Red Sea into the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So really from trade and travel perspective, it really was a significant spot to be able to get through. And if the Soviet Union, for example, controlled it, it would destabilize the region. 4, describe 3 goals of the space race. 1 was to develop missile technologies capable of delivering nuclear warheads across the globe. So the space race is kind of part of the arms race in some ways, because the arms race is building up your military and your arms and weapons, and the means to deliver those armaments became part of the space race. Additionally, they want to launch satellites into outer space for spy and communication purposes. They wanted to develop their space program on both sides to put the very first astronauts into orbit and eventually on the moon. And generally speaking, the goal of each country, the United States and the Soviet Union, was to outdo each other in all these areas, to kind of be the first to put a satellite into outer space, be the first to put a astronaut or cosmonaut to orbit the Earth, to put the first astronaut or cosmonaut onto the moon. 5, how were the Cold War tensions intensified by the space race? Well, the United States and Soviet Union competed for better technology and satellites that they could send into space. The Soviets sent a tiny satellite into orbit called Sputnik 1. They launched a larger satellite after this, which shocked the Americans, who believed that America had the superior technology, but it was becoming quite clear that we were falling behind. The United States eventually creates NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, to help coordinate our space-related efforts. Next, we'll go to the identifications. MAD, or mutually assured destruction. This is when 2 adversaries during the Cold War, the Soviet Union versus the United States, they developed powerful weapons of mass destruction, and they knew that if the 2 sides used these weapons on each other, they would end up destroying each other. There would be really no winner. So basically, they would scare each other so that neither side would use the weapons against each other for fear that they too would be destroyed. Many argue that even to this day, this has prevented World War III. John Foster Dulles was President Eisenhower's Secretary of State, who helped to first organize the United Nations after World War II, and then later on appointed to Eisenhower's cabinet in 1953. John Foster Dulles helped Eisenhower develop the Eisenhower Doctrine, mutually assured destruction, and the policy of brinkmanship, some of the core Cold War policies of Eisenhower's administration. Massive retaliation is the use of overwhelming force and weapons to respond to potential threats. Eisenhower stated this was a better bang for the buck approach to the military budget, meaning that instead of investing in large numbers of troops and deploying them across the globe, it would be a lot more cost effective to just develop up the weapons of mass destruction and use those as either as a deterrent or physically to use during war. Brinkmanship, this is the idea that you would go to the very brink of war to protect allies, discourage communist aggression, and prevent warfare. Obviously, you're taking a chance that if you go to war against another country, or at least go to the brink of it, they'll call your bluff, and then you'll end up in a war. Dulles advocated this approach, arguing the United States needed to show strength to deter adversaries. He actually argued, too, the United States did not show much in the way of brinkmanship in regard to China, and as a result, China turned communist. Nikita Khrushchev, he became the new leader of the Soviet Union after Joseph Stalin's death in 1953. Less tyrannical than Stalin, but he made some bold statements about winning the Cold War and eventually destroying the United States. Nationalized is when something is under government control. Most of the businesses and industries in the Soviet Union were under the Soviet or government control. Okay, the Suez Canal crisis. The Suez Canal crisis began on October 29, 1956, when Israeli army's forces pushed into Egypt towards the Suez Canal after Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the canal, a very valuable waterway that controlled 2/3 of the oil used by Europe in terms of the transportation of it. Fight over the control of the Suez Canal and trade between allies erupted, nearly leading to World War III. The Israelis would soon be joined by the French and British forces, which nearly brought the Soviet Union into the conflict and severely damaged the relationship with the United States. In the end, Egypt emerged victorious. British, French, and Israeli governments withdrew their troops in late 1956 and early 1957. This is a pivotal event among the Cold War superpowers. This helped to lead to a reinforcement of the Eisenhower Doctrine after the Suez Canal crisis. Eisenhower announced that the United States would use force to help any Middle Eastern country that was threatened by communism, and this really expanded the Cold War into the Middle East. The CIA, or Central Intelligence Agency, this is the United States spy agency. This protected American interests, spied on the Soviet Union and other countries. The CIA was used to influence governments around the world. In particular, during this period of time, we see this in Iran, as they installed a very brand new government under the Shah Reza Pahlavi, who would become an ally of the United States, and he was anti-communist. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was established with complexes in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and Houston, Texas. This was to coordinate our space-related activities and developments, including rocket and missile technologies. Later on, John F. Kennedy tasked it with putting the very first astronaut on the moon. Some bonus terms to kind of be familiar with. Ideology is a set of beliefs of a group or a political party. Radioactive, this means having or giving off dangerous forms of energy or radiation. Perpetual is constant, continually without interruption. And that was kind of what the Cold War was. It was constant tension during the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right into the early 90s. Uprising is usually a violent effort by people to change the government in their country. All right, so this will wrap up our look here at the terms and questions for 15.3. Again, if you're absent and you get a chance to complete it, make sure you do so as soon as possible and submit that in Google Classroom.